Hey, good morning, sir. Welcome.
Good morning. Welcome. Good to see you.
You too, man. I'm always amazed that we have so many chats and so much discussion and so much happens for both of us in our own lives, and yet 95% of the world in our time zone, anyways, is still asleep.
Yeah.
Like so much, it's great.
Well, and I appreciate that you and I do have a lot that we can jam about and chat about and just explore as dads, as men, as friends. So again, I appreciate you. I appreciate our conversations. I'm sure we'll have a great one here as well that we get to share with others.
Yeah. So one of the things we were talking about before on air about what are we going to talk about is one of the events that I found really just moving and just stirring out so much emotion in all aspects of my life. And not that I don't want this to for us to be. I don't know, we can be political if we want, but I don't mean this to come across as political, but one of the things that recently happened was that the former president of the U.S., Donald Trump, was shot at during one of his rallies, and just the chaos that is unfolding from that. I remember watching that and just, I mean, I wept after I saw that, going like, "What is this world like? This is so crazy." Sort of like I was a kid. I mean, you're 46, right? You're 46.
Yep.
So you were born in 78. So I was born in 78 also. Yeah. So we would have been 3 years old the last time this happened in the US. So I guess there was Ronald Reagan. There was an assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan in 1981. So we wouldn't have been old enough to remember all that happening. But like it's here it is. Like it's happened. And I remember watching a little clip on Twitter X and just seeing like what had happened to Donald Trump and the fallout of all of that, and just looking over at my kids and just going, what is this world where like they're living, like they're growing up in this crazy world, and it seems to just be intensifying. And I was mentioning this quote that I kept thinking about that I thought would open up some conversation for us. Was this the quote is, never feel sorry for raising dragon slayers in a time when there are actual dragons. And I've spoken to a lot of people over the years that have consciously decided not to have kids at this time because they don't want to raise kids in this crazy world. They feel it's crazy enough, and it would be a disservice to children. It would be not good for them to be raised in the world that we live in today. What lands? Is there anything that lands with you about any of that?
Nah. Let's go to the next topic. No, I'm just kidding.
Next.
Next. Wouldn't that be funny though? I don't, we've never done that before. But like, nah, I don't want to talk about that one. Let's move on. Um, you're so yes, maybe for similar or other reasons, when I saw that, it definitely, struck me too. I don't mean that any bad use of those words, but it stuck out to me. Like it hit me, right? Like, for a few reasons, right? Like he's a dad. Here we are talking about being dad. Like here's a dad. Here's
Mm-hmm.
someone who thinks that that's the best way of dealing with what they're feeling about, like, is to actually take a literal shot at somebody is what they've come to as the conclusion of as the best solution. Like there's so much for me in something like this. um Another part, well, dragons definitely I want to talk about too, because it's interesting. They're coming up a lot. Like one of the programs that Kevin, one of my coaches, has been helping with is slay my own internal dragons, like our own demons, our own dragons, our own shadows. So there's just an internal part of that I think about, and then also this expression that I've recently come learned about from the I'm half Japanese, And in Japan, for decades, they have this saying, "The nail that sticks up gets hammered." And
Mm.
so it's fascinating for me to see how that plays out. Like in my own life, I've realized like how that's playing out or has played out in the past. Here's potentially another example of that. Like, where did that quote come from? Why is it actually a thing? But anyways, there's a lot that comes up for me with something like this that would love to chat about, and certainly I'll bring it back to yeah, being a dad. You know, with something like this, then yeah, one question I have is, do you think would you share it? Like, do your kids know about it? Would you share it with them? What's the conversation just in your own household about something like this?
I, I've not talked to them about it. I don't know that they would really comprehend the concept. I mean, my kids are 8 and 4 at this point. The 8-year-old
Yeah.
might have some concept, but one of the things in that I have talked to them about, and that has come up from that, is that it is up to us that regardless of how anybody on the outside is acting, that we have the ability and the responsibility to act properly for us. Like even with the kids, like one of them, they get into this thing where they will like, well, she did this, so I'm going to do this. You hit me, so I'm going to hit you. This whole idea of an eye for an eye, but an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And just the idea that it doesn't matter how other people treat us, that we have the power and we have the responsibility to treat others well. And I was talking to my oldest, especially because she grasps the concepts a little bit more. But just the idea that none of us know what anybody else is going through, and we don't just from the outside know what the other people that we're interacting with are feeling, and they be maybe acting really mean, and they be maybe acting really really badly towards us or towards somebody else. And just to know that we don't know why they're doing that. They could be doing that because something really bad just happened to them. They could be doing that because they've had a lifetime of seeing that, and that's the only thing that they know. And so it's like the idea, and I even see this professionally too, that like as a speaking coach, when I'm speaking to people, I want to be able to influence them. I want to be able for them to see the things that I see. I want to be able to have them feel the things that I feel, and for them to engage and take action on the things, the ideas, the principles, the concepts, the strategies that I'm talking to them about. But I can't influence somebody if I'm judging them. Nobody is going to be influenced if they're like you're this, you're that. And so it's removing ourselves, and like Tony talks about this all the time, is the first step in terms of making transformation with somebody else is to understand their world, right? And so to teach our kids, and as I teach my kid, like we don't know what goes on, and like sometimes for you, like I don't know what goes on in your own head. Like you will get upset about something, and I don't necessarily know what happened, and that's okay. But all we can do is start with this idea that if we're just kind to other people, we're kind to ourselves, firstly, then it can't make things worse. It can only make things better in the long run. It might make someone mad that you're being nice to them when they're being really pissy and really shitty, but ultimately that's on them. And all that we can do is just be responsible for ourselves.
Well, very interesting. So I think it's fascinating. So I love your approach, and I think it's fascinating that, for example, the individual who did this, who took a shot at Trump, he could have learned the same quote when he grew up. You know, being a dragon slayer, like in a world of dragons, like you need to
Right, and
slay these
and
dragons,
that Trump is the dragon.
right? But using it externally, like the dragon's out
Mm,
there that I need to slay. It's fascinating. Same
right.
quote, different interpretation. Whereas where you're going with it is, look, there's going to be some stuff that upsets us out there. There's going to be a person that we might not agree with. A lot of people might not agree with. What is it, but the work is within us most of the time, in terms of what is it about this person that upsets us so much? What is it about this event? What is it about this, thing that feels like it's happening to us that's causing me to be so upset? But the dragon largely is within us to slay, that reaction, that judgment, that emotion, that something that we've buried, especially as we get older, right? And that's, but yeah, I love where you're going with it too. And that's the approach that I've been doing more of, is to figure out what my own dragons are, like the things that the clue that I'm getting to realize is, and this is something that Kevin's helping with, is these triggers, like we have them. And I know in the sort of work, in the spiritual realm, when you're doing that kind of work, it's not about not getting triggered. It's just about reducing the amount of time that you stay triggered for.
Right.
So these dragons typically in us are the clue that they're there is something that we get triggered by. And obviously, the bigger the trigger, potentially the bigger the dragon. So using that as, rather than they're the cause of why I'm being triggered, and therefore I need to do something about it, and they're the problem. It's no, why they're the trigger, but they're not the cause. Like, what is the actual cause? So I feel like that's, the work that you're doing with your kids. And similarly, I can share some stories within my own kid, my own family, and even just with myself, is the other person is the stimulus, the catalyst, the trigger, but they're not the cause. Like, they're doing their life, they're doing their own thing. Why is it that why am I getting so triggered? Why what is it? What is my own dragon that I can slay within me? That would help me in this situation the next time it happens or going forward.
It's funny. You're saying that the topic of dragons has been coming up a lot. I'm just remembering right now as you're saying that, my dad used to have this little post-it note, a handwritten post-it note on his desk, on the wall beside his desk, and it said, this is back when I was a teenager, and it said, "The dragons you don't slay get passed down to your children."
He had that.
I remember that. I'm like, wow. And, as a dad thinking of this now, like, this is all just come to me right this second. Like, wow, like, I know that there's so much of what we want to do as dads, is what we want to do as parents, is that we want to give our kids the opportunities that maybe that we have missed. We want to give them a life that we didn't have, or we want to give them more than what we have. And I think that that's amazing. And there's so much in that I know that for the longest time, maybe now my kids are a little bit older, so we're transitioning, but that transition into the life of them learning to do things for themselves, them becoming the people that they are meant to be, the people that they want to become, is, taking on more responsibility, taking on more things that they're going to not necessarily be good at, taking on things that they don't know, but they're going to learn on for themselves, rather than, for the longest time, I did everything for them in that, like all the survival stuff, making them breakfast and changing their diapers and picking out clothes and buying them things and all that sort of stuff. But as they transition into learning more of themselves and from themselves, like how important that is to just do my own work. So I'm not passing on my own limitations. I'm not passing on my own things down to them. And and I think about how big of a job that is, and how, I didn't, for the longest time, I took what my parents did for granted, good and bad. And I blame them for so many things that I wish were different. And yet now it's like, well, no, that was perfect. Because if they, like Tony talks about a lot, like about his own mom, who was an alcoholic and who, growing up with 7 stepfathers, and the abuse that he encountered, that he said, if my mom had been the mom that I wanted her to be, or that I needed her to be, I would not have grown up to be the man that I am today. And to think back about what my dad and what my mom went through to give us the things that they did, and how hard that job is, because you're dealing with people, even never mind just kids, but like we're dealing in a world where you act on what you feel is right. You do and say and think the things that you think are going to move your life forward. Yet we don't necessarily know how that's going to affect somebody else. And that could hurt somebody else. And that can, that could not have a great result for somebody else. But we don't know that. And how that just pervades in their own life. Like there's just so much, like it's heavy. It's heavy to think that, my dad was having those feelings about that he had all these dragons that he was trying to slay. And I never saw them. I mean, I guess I maybe perceive them now, but I always thought about, my dad is just like, he was perfect. He was the man. He was my hero. Still is. But he's more human now than he was back when I was a kid. And I think about that with my own daughters. Like, what are they like? They're looking up to me, and what am I showing them?
Right.
Like, if I want them to be a dragon slayer, am I being a dragon slayer?
Yeah. I feel
And like to your point, what are the dragons that we're slaying? Are they internal or are they external?
Right. Right. That's huge. That part you just shared with that you're sharing with your dad, and that he had that actual quote. Because we could make this all about our kids, right? Oh, look at the dragons they have coming up. I need to help them slay them. Not and forget that maybe what's coming up for them is something that I still haven't worked on. Like they're just a mirror. And so, it's really, as dads, as part of this work, it's not all about just focusing on them and making sure they're good. There's so much that, well, I know that's what we've talked about a lot on this show, is there's so much that starts with us, that, for them to be a dragon slayer and see them be able to slay their own internal dragons starts with us. We need to be that dragon slayer ourselves. We need to be aware of what our own dragons are. We need to be able to figure out a process and a way that we've been able to slay them ourselves for us to be able to teach them how to do it, right? Like, I know that was the biggest aha when I was reading Dr. Shafali. Have you read her books? Like, I've read one of them, I think, or two of them, and seen talk. Conscious Parenting, I think, is that one, her big one.
Right. I don't remember the names of her books. Yeah, I remember seeing her speak, and I haven't read one of her books front to back, but
yeah, I mean, the big concept that I think I took away that was really helpful is, I think she was like maybe a child psychologist, so she would have these kids come in that the parents would bring in and be like, hey, fix my kid, or there's something going on with my kid, can you help them out? And she'd be like, okay, I can. And can you ask the kid to stay out in the waiting room? Can you parents please come in so I can talk to you first? That's where she started, right? Is what's going on with the parents that may be showing up with the kids, So I just feel like it's up to us to really, it's the man in the mirror, right? Michael Jackson. It's us being willing to look in the mirror and make sure that we're slaying our own dragons, and knowing how important that work is, like you're saying, like really figuring out the ones that may have gotten passed down to us that could be generational, right? I know there's a saying that the stuff we heal within ourselves heals 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. Like the significance of stuff that we can sort out in this lifetime that doesn't get passed on can be massive, right? If you think of how significant some of these dragons can be that gets passed on from family to generation to generation, and what gets carried on, and how devastating that can be for future generations. But imagine how significant that work is if we're able to be aware of them, figure out how, get some help, and slay our own dragons. I mean, that to me is that's tremendous.
Yeah. I love the idea, and it becomes a daunting idea that whatever generational traumas or whatever generational patterns that we've learned, that we can choose that it ends with us. That this is it. It stops here, and something else starts here. And for so many of us, myself included, like there's so much that is just, I don't know what I don't know. And it's not until, and doing this work and even, having these conversations, like I've learned so much about my own patterns and my own self, and just being conscious of it. Because I think there's a lot of what happens as with parenting, because we're so busy with business, we're so busy with, trying to keep our marriage together, trying to keep our kids together, trying to keep them alive, like everything that's happening. There's not necessarily a lot of time or space for reflection. And for sitting back, going, okay, well, is this happening the way that I want it to happen? Am I doing the right thing here? Because we're just in it, and it could be years sometimes if we're not careful. It could be years. We look back, going, oh shit, I really fucked that up, or man, I really wish that were different. But being able to just have conversations like this have really opened up my own mind in my own heart to a lot of things that I want to do this different, or I want to make sure that this continues, or I want to make sure that this stops. And knowing that it's whatever happened to me isn't necessarily something that just happened to me, but I can choose that it happened for me, and that things may not have been my fault, that there may be dragons all around here, and I may be having to work hard to slay these dragons, but that's my responsibility. It may not be my fault, but it is my responsibility. And if I want that to stop here, if I don't want those same dragons that were attacking my dad, that are attacking me, to attack my own children, then I need to slay them. That's up to me.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah. Official title, Alain Dragon Slayer. Can you think of one, or is there one that comes to mind, or you'd be willing to share of a dragon that you've slayed, or largely slayed, or slaying, or how that's gone or going, or a process you've used to go about that, or what's worked? Anything around that? Just an example of your own.
No, I don't know if this is something that is. I mean, so I have two girls. I grew up in a family with one girl and three boys, and I have my experience as a boy with a dad and a mom. So I don't know what it's like exactly for my own daughters, but I know that one thing for me that I experienced. My dad is a bit different now, but I know growing up he was always somebody that we would characterize as somebody who was like a very stoic character. Like he didn't speak a lot, but when he did, it was you listened when he did speak, because he didn't speak a lot, but it was always something of consequence whenever he would speak. And I could see from his dad to him, there was not a lot of affection. We knew that there was a lot of love there in their family, but I don't ever remember my grandfather saying anything like telling his own, like my dad, that he loved him. And I know even today when I tell my dad I love him, like I could see him get a little uncomfortable, and he might say it back or he might not, but I know that that's something that is consciously uncomfortable for him, it seems. So I grew up, he always did lots of stuff for me, did lots of stuff with me, was always super supportive of like all my sports things that I did, and my, even growing up, like business endeavors and things like that. But there was never not a lot of affection, like a lot of words of like, hey, I love you, and things like that. And that's something that I have definitely changed with my own kids, is with my girls. I mean, I probably don't go an hour without telling them that I love them. And something that I read recently, or I heard, I'm not sure where, but something to repeat to your kids, something that we do every day now, is I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'm so glad that you're mine. And I tell my kids that all the time. And sometimes it'll be to the point where my daughter will be like, I know. Or I'll be like, hey, Ev, you know what? And she'll be like, you love me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's definitely something that, like, I know that when I don't know that I'm, it's swinging the pendulum all the way to the other end, but it's certainly an extreme from what I had growing up, from my dad, anyways. This is the level of just speaking life into me. And I guess maybe also, I mean, I am one of my love languages from the five love languages. One of my love languages is words of affirmation. So that might be something that I focus on a little bit more on giving because it's something that I appreciate as well. So how about you?
Yeah. Well, two big things come up for me. One is just, what you're saying there about it's interesting that the thing that we want, like maybe you wanted that as a kid, or it's your love language, you want, words of affection really mean a lot for you. But the fact when it's interesting, I feel like I've experienced when you give that very thing that you're looking to get, you also get it.
Right.
Rather than trying to get it from the outside world, which is hard. You can't control what other people are going to do. They might not ever, no one might ever give it to you, but the fact that you give it to somebody else also gives it to yourself. I just think I don't know, that's been my experience with it. It's been really interesting. So then
Mm-hmm.
it feels more empowering. It's like this very thing that I'm hoping I get if I just give it, even though it feels really uncomfortable, maybe. It actually, I'm like, oh, that felt really good. It's actually giving me what I'm trying to get by just giving it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, there's that part of it, and then for me, there's a lot, a lot of dragons. I mean, just when you do your own work, right? You start to realize that you start kicking over all these rocks, and it's like, oh, there's that, and oh, there's that, and there's that from my childhood, and there's that from my parents, and that from that other kid. And, there's all this stuff that I don't know, at least personally, I've realized that I've carried with me that isn't serving me anymore. Um, I used to call them, well, I still do, boat anchors. Like I felt like I was just carrying around all this stuff that was really
Mm.
just dragging me down and slowing me down. And it was just like making me feel heavy and it just wasn't serving me. And so that I feel like there's just so much in the emotional realm. Like that's what comes up for me is like for guys, and maybe it's just being, I know you shared some stuff around being affectionate with your family. And same for me. Like that wasn't a big part of my household. Like my parents had other ways that they showed me love and in many great ways. My parents were awesome. Just verbally or like physically, that wasn't a big thing that they grew up with. And so that wasn't a big thing I grew up with. And you're right, that's exactly something that I've chosen to be wanting to be better at and giving. I give it back to my parents and I give it to my kids, and I don't expect it from anyone else. But it feels so good to actually be able to give it,
Mm-hmm.
but even just in general, a lot of emotions. I feel like that's the most right now. That movie Inside Out 2, I think is like the most successful Pixar, Disney, whatever category it's in. Like so far, it's like the most successful ever. Like it's already made a
Really?
billion
Oh,
dollars.
fascinating.
Yeah, and I feel like it's this whole. I don't know. I felt a lot of this coming into this year. Like again, maybe this is my own slice of the world. It's just this ability or awareness of these emotions, and again maybe this is just me as a guy growing up. I didn't have like this huge emotional vocabulary. I didn't have the ability or felt like it was okay to express a lot of emotions. Like I don't know, I felt like you had to be quite stoic and you had to show that you had it figured out. And maybe that's as a dad, as a husband, I don't know. I mean, that's my own, that was my own story many years ago. Is I guess I've just realized a lot, and especially in the last several years, around, oh, it is okay to have this full range of emotions. Like that's life, right? Like it's not about just being happy and joyous all the time. No, like that's the whole point of that movie. At least the first one was,
Mm-hmm.
there's joy because of sadness, and there are some things in life that are sad, and it's beautiful to be able to embrace that sadness and process it, and allow yourself to be sad, allow yourself to be frustrated, allow yourself to be, but and how healthy that can be if you allow yourself to express it, in a healthy way, rather than I think I did what I did as a kid was to suppress a lot of that. Like not, I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know it. Maybe I didn't feel safe to. I didn't have some tools about, how to do it healthily. So I just have realized that's been a lot of dragons to slay is my ability to feel safe expressing emotion. And I can
Mm-hmm.
say that the men's groups that we've been a part of, both of us, right now I've been a part of a group for the past almost 9 years of the same guys that we talk every single week. And that I've realized has been like an emotional support group. Like we can share the rawest, realest things, that we're upset about, that we're sad about, that we're happy about, that we're loving about. Like it doesn't, this is a group that we've created this sacred container to allow us to each, potentially bring up these dragons and get some help slaying them and get some perspectives and do our own work. So yeah, there's more specifics I could share. I just think in general, this whole realm for me, and I think maybe a lot of guys and dads is, and maybe it's not necessarily always in our household. If it's kind of like sometimes we need a bit of a gym to go and work out some of the stuff, and then come back to the family and share. Oh yeah, this is what I've realized, and this is how I want to be, and this is how I am going to be for my kids
Hmm.
because I've figured this stuff out. So, anyways, that's the big one. I think is just a lot of stuff in that emotional realm.
Yeah, it's something that's coming up for me too. Something else that I know with my kids, I talk a lot about when we set up rules or when we set up things that we want our kids to do, and we tell them to do things. I remember as a kid, there was a lot of do this because I say, because, just because. And I can think back, like, I don't know a lot about my dad and my mom when they were kids. Like, they didn't really, it was never something that they really shared about, like, stuff about what they went through when they were kids. And I know with my kids, I talk a lot about that. Like, yeah, well, I made this mistake, and they're like, "Wow, you did that? Like, you were bad?" Like, yeah, yeah, and that's why I don't want you to do this. Like, I know the feeling of what that's like, and I don't want you to have to, to learn the hard way, like I did. And part of that, I feel, humanizes me a little bit. It provides some more context to why I'm saying what I'm saying. And I know it's not necessarily like kids don't necessarily aren't critically thinking or thinking about reason and logic and things like that a lot as much as it's even as guys as we do as adults. But just to give like I want to share myself. I have nothing to hide. That my mistakes are part of this whole thing. Like there's the saying that I love is, your message is your mess, or your mess is your message. Your message comes from your mess, and it's okay. Like to tell my kids and to show my kids that it's okay to make mistakes. That there's the way that you act and who you are. Those are not necessarily the same things.
Right.
That you are loved regardless of what you do or how you do it. And something that I love, I admire about you with your kids is I know your kids seem to have a very, it's like there's an open door policy with you, is that they can tell you everything and they feel comfortable telling you all kinds of different things. And I know growing up, I didn't necessarily feel, I definitely felt a little bit more comfortable with my mom than my dad. But to know that, yeah, they can just share everything, and that's okay, that they feel comfortable. We were seeing some years ago, Will Smith and whatever his wife's name, Jada Pinkett Smith, and their kids, like they had this concept of the circle of trust, and that their kids, whenever they would sit down and they would say, okay, I want to be in the circle of trust, that then okay, they kind of lock in as a family, and they could just share anything, and there's no judgment, there's no consequence, anything as bad as it could be. That like I just want to share, and then we're going to figure it out. And like I think you were mentioning in one of our previous weeks about like teaching our kids lessons. There's the time when things are happening is not necessarily when they're in it. Is not necessarily the time when you discipline or when we're trying to get the lesson across. Sometimes that in that moment, it's just to be ultra supportive, to tell them that they're okay, and to tell them that everything's going to be fine, and tell them that they're loved, and for them to like, okay, then when we're not in the moment necessarily in the chaos, that's we can deal with other things later. And I think that's beautiful. It's something that I love about that I've learned a lot from you and your family.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. The trust bubble that you're sharing there is not the same as the like intense in the moment bubble of when someone's in it and triggered. Yeah, in my experience, those are two separate times. Well, and just you said a lot there, like that's also a dragon that I think I've done a good job and still working on. Is the vulnerability one, like as guys, as dads, as husbands, like being real, being open, being vulnerable, like the power of vulnerability. Like, I think that's one of the most watched TED Talks is Brene Brown's, and she's got a whole body of work and books on that, like just how
Hmm.
powerful vulnerability actually is. Because I think it creates safety, right? I think if people know really why you're asking for something, when you're asking your kids to do something, or you're asking your spouse or a friend, like if you're willing to be real about it and being true and honest and open about it, I think that just creates safety, right? Because as humans, we have mechanisms that allow us to detect bullshit. Like whether we know it or not, right? There is a piece of us that has allowed us to survive tens of thousands of years. Like we know
Hmm.
when someone's telling us the truth or not. And so I think, if you're coming from that place of I'm telling you to do this just because, I'm the parent or I'm the boss or, that's never unfortunately resonated with me. Like I've had a problem with that. Certainly more so when I was a kid in high school and with employers. Like if anyone ever did that, like I was just that was a trigger for me, just that, in my opinion, an abuse of authority. I'm much better dealing with that now. But I think we owe it to our kids to be real, to be vulnerable, to let them know, like, this is why I'm asking you to do this. Like, like you're saying, like this was something for me as a kid. That's what, I didn't do this or it didn't work out well. And this is why I'm asking you because I don't want you to make the same mistake. And then they can go, even my 7-year old, like she'll get that. She'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, daddy, I understand now. Um, I don't know. That's been something really important that I've also worked on is just as guys, especially like how to be vulnerable. And that's been a
Hmm.
huge part of the men's group, right? Is having a space where we can be super vulnerable and realize how helpful that can be, how powerful that can be, and how deep you can connect with people when you are being willing to be that. So yeah, that to me is a big dragon. And then trust too, on that topic, it's a two-way street, right? That's what I've also realized is I can't just ask my kids to tell me everything and to create trust. Like I say on the topic of vulnerability, like I also need to be real with them. Like I need to be, like it's a two-way thing. They need to be able to trust me, and so I need to share with them things that is going to allow them to create trust with me too. And I need to
Hmm.
show them that I trust them, and give them opportunities. And, so it's so that they're, I strongly believe in the sort of innocent until proven guilty. Like I need to give them opportunities to show me trust and let them know that how important that is and what would trust actually mean to me, right? Like I would like you to be open with me, be honest with me. If you try and trick me and try and you know, what's the red like lie or try and twist things to get your way. That's not going to create trust. That's not going to it'll allow me to give you more opportunities like this. Like I'm going to have a hard time. So
Hmm.
that's been the biggest thing about I think trust is it's two ways. I need to show them. I sometimes lead by example. I'll be real with them. I need to give them trust for them to have it. And then for them to be able to give it back. So. I don't know.
Hmm.
We're all still figuring this out. I certainly don't have it all figured out by any means, but I do have a sense that I think some of these things are working out.
Yeah, and as you're bringing that up, this idea of trust, it reminds me of something that like I learned this from my parents that I think is so great that I've carried forward. That is definitely a sticky sometimes. Is I remember when I was probably 13, 14, something like that. I became the one kid in my social circle that had no curfew. I had no curfew whatsoever. And I remember at the time when my mom and my dad sat me down and said, okay, like you're like, I don't know if I was asking like, I want to stay out later or something like that. Then they're like, okay, tell you what, you can stay out as late as you want. And that at that point, it was communicated and I'm paraphrasing because I don't exactly remember any specific conversations, but it was like, trust is not earned. Trust is given, and trust is yours to lose. It's not yours to gain; it's yours to lose. So I'm going to start out by trusting you. You've got my trust. Now it's your job to keep it. And this idea, I remember that very clearly with my parents. This idea of the concept of truth and consequence. That whatever you choose to do, like there's a cause and an effect. You can stay out super, super late. That's your truth. You can do that. The consequence of that is that next day you might be dragging ass. The rest of the world is not going to stop. The rest of our family is not going to stop doing the things that we are committed to doing just because of your poor choices. So you're going to have to live with the consequences of your poor choices. And that was something that I remember. Like it was like that was I was big. I remember walking walking back home one night because it was so late that the buses didn't run anymore in the city. This is in Winnipeg. And the buses ran super, super late, but the buses did not run anymore. And it was the middle of winter, and I remember walking home, and it was probably 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m., something like that. And I was walking home with a friend of mine. He had snuck out of his house. My parents knew where I was. And this is before cell phones or social media or anything like that. So it's like I think of what that would be like. For, my kids are just out and I don't even know where they are. But I remember getting home and like the next day we were going skiing as a family. And so I get home at 2 a.m. and we leave the house at 6 to go skiing. And I remember dragging ass the rest of that whole day, just like, oh, I was so exhausted. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is not worth it. It's not worth it to stay out super late like that. Like I wanted to go skiing. I missed out on a whole bunch of stuff. And I remember being very conscious of that. And I don't know if either of my parents had a conversation with me about that afterwards. Like, hey, did you see what happened there? But I remember thinking like, it's not worth it. And so I was always very responsible with that. And it was something that, I know I've taken moving forward is with anybody that I meet in any situation. And I know that I've been, people have come down on me like, why are you trusting this person? Or like, you're way too trusting, because I've been burned a lot. I've been burnt a hell of a lot in my life. But I feel like I've also gained way more from that than if I was just jaded and feeling like everybody had to earn my trust. And I feel like that's something that really started when I was a kid. Like trust is not earned, trust is given, and trust is yours to lose. And that's what I want to start out with my kids. Like I trust you, and this is what it takes for you to continue earning that trust. Not like my kids ever have to do something to get somewhere where they're then trusted. It's like, no, this is where we start.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. Yeah. I was saying that feels like innocent. Like you're innocent. I'm not gonna, you're not guilty, and you have to prove you're innocent. No, you're innocent. Like I'm going to trust you off the bat. I'm going to give you this trust, and then you're, then show me, right? And they're going to dance with it and gain more responsibility with it, right? And but I think it goes back to the very beginning. I think we started out with this, like when we're talking about helping ourselves and them slay their dragons. It's helping them be the leaders of their own lives. I know that's a concept we've talked a lot about right from the very beginning of this show. Is maybe it's more of a dad thing. Like maybe it's because dads, I don't know, way back in the day, we would be, as cavemen, we would have gone out and hunted, and maybe we don't always come back, right? And so I think we're always instinctually trying to support our kids, our families to be self-sufficient, like for them at a young age to be able to be that leader of their own life, because we might not always be around. I don't know if that's every dad, but I don't know if you feel like that. I feel like it's an instinctual thing that I want very early for them to be empowered. I want them to be very early to be the leader of their own life. I mean, whatever is appropriate given their age. It's exactly that. Is they need to learn, in my opinion, when is a good time to go to bed. And what the actual direct consequences of their own life is if they don't, right? If it's school the next morning or a big thing they've got, is they need to learn that for themselves. Because if we're telling them when their bedtime is, and we're telling them what's appropriate and when they need to get up and how they need to do things in their life, then that isn't helping them be the leader of their own life. That's us leading them. That's us being the leader of their life. And therefore it becomes extrinsic, right? They're driven by extrinsic motivation at that point. And so then if we're not around, like once they move out, then they're like, okay, well, who's going to tell me what to do next? So now
Hmm.
they're searching for the next person that they need to tell them what to do, right? Then they're going to end up being in the job and the boss. And for me, that's not at least how I like to live my own life. I'm not looking for someone else to tell me what to do all the time. I mean, I grew up with that.
Hmm.
And believe me, it's taken some work to get to a point where I'm like, no, I want to be the leader of my own life. Like I want to, I want to be able to call these shots. I know what's right for me, and I need to learn when I've, gone too far. So yeah, I think that's super important, as early as possible. And there's different things, obviously, like I remember my youngest would want to wear whatever she would want to wear to school. And if I'm trying if I make it about me, I'd be like, "Oh no, what are parents going to think?" And what's that going to look like if she wears this total, outfit that she's put together. And yet, if I don't make it about me, if I allow her to be the leader of her own life, then I think education becomes super helpful in that time where I'm like, look, are you okay with this outfit? Like if you're okay if other kids don't agree with it and it's not their style and they say something, then she's like, yeah, I'm totally fine. I love this outfit. And if I've given her all the things I can think about to empower her to go forward and she still wants to, then I'm like, fantastic. You know what? This is your life. If you want to wear that, that's not about me.
Right.
It's not a big photo that's going to live on forever. I mean, so anyways, I'm rambling, but I can think of so many examples where I think it's been super helpful to allow them to make mistakes, for allow them to be the leader of their own life, for they'll allow them to realize the direct consequences that some of their own choices have. And as long as something can't go terribly wrong, like that's where I start is look, here's the worst case scenario. Here's the thing that I'm leading with our fears first as being a thing a coach shared with me many years ago, how helpful that can be so that I'm not trying to mask my own fears in a projection of you must do this because I said so. No, it's like, okay,
Hmm.
here's why I think that you shouldn't, or here's what could go really wrong. This is what I'm afraid of so that they can understand, oh, that's what dad's afraid of. Not, I don't need to be afraid of that, but I've let them know what these things that I'm afraid, and therefore they can, and then we can have a conversation like, this is what I'm afraid of. And then a lot of the times they're going to go, oh, well, that's not a problem because of this and this and this. And they'll help me with my own fears. And then if they feel far more empowered, be like, okay. And I feel far better about it. I'm like, I've let them know the worst things that I could think could happen here that I'm worried about and
Hmm.
they've helped me figure those things out and why they're not going to happen. And then I'm like, okay, well then I feel totally good about this. Go for it.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a long rant about that.
Yeah. No, I think, and it also is important that whenever we're talking to them about being leaders of their own lives, that also means that we are being leaders of our own lives. Like
Yeah.
we're not telling them, "Hey, you got to eat really healthy," as we're stuffing cake down our face holes.
Right.
Like they see like how much kids learn, not so much from what we tell them, but by what they're seeing. Like they're little sponges. Like I can't tell you how many times I've walked in and my girls are doing like these like I call them kid squats, where they're just like they're doing like their squats, like they're doing like a like an exercise, like a squat exercise, but it looks hilarious because they have no form and they're just little kids and they're super funny. But I'll walk in and they're doing like push-ups or sit-ups or squats because they've seen me do it a whole bunch. I never told them to do it,
Mm.
but it's like all of a sudden when I do say something, I feel like it has more weight to it because we are living from or we're leading from what we live. It's not just do this because I say. It's this is how I live and this is how you can live too.
Yeah. We've said it also many times. Yeah. Being, the best way we can, teach or impart these lessons on them is, I entirely agree with you. Yes. Is to be the example. I know it's a cheesy quote, but, if we truly are being that example for them, then and that's what like if I think back to again my dad, that was one of the best things that he did was he was a great example of a lot of these values and characteristics and things that I aim to embody or I do embody or I want to pass on is he didn't preach a lot, he didn't actually verbally say a lot to me and teach me that way, which also would have been helpful. but he was a really great example. And so he taught a
Mhm.
lot just by how he was and who he was. And so yeah, to your point there, I just think that's the best way. Certainly, we can teach them to be the leaders of their own lives is if we are able to be that for ourselves, for sure.
Yeah, and then when they grew up to go slay their own dragons, they're actually slaying dragons that contribute to the world in a positive, healthy way, and not some delusional way, like sitting on top of a fucking building and trying to shoot another person, like we started out talking about former President Donald Trump. Like
Yeah.
the delusion that has to go on in someone's mind to think that that's the dragon, like this is the dragon I'm going to slay, like this is the dragon. Like how out of control does someone need to feel within themselves that that's the thing that they feel like is the best thing to do to contribute to the world. I'm going to murder another person. I think this person is there's so much projection of the problems that I have, the problems that the world have is so far beyond me that I need to do this radical thing, and that's going to help fix the world. And then let's say he got away with it. Let's say that happened and he got away with it. He would likely find very soon that, the world is no different. I have the same problems. I have the same chaos. I have the same trauma. That didn't do anything except escalate the, escalate the trauma within me.
Hmm.
And it's not until we slay it's the internal dragons, which allows us to, yeah, like when we think about contributing to the world, like once we have a sense of certainty, once we have a sense of significance, once we have a sense of variety, once we have a sense of love and connection within ourselves and a sense of growth, then the highest need that we have is then to then contribute to the world. And that's what we want to teach our kids, to be able to be a contribution to the world, to give, not to take away, not to take from the world, not to try to strip down the world, but to build it up, to build other people up, to build themselves up, to find joy, to find love, and to give love, to create that. And I think in a world where we were talking about at the start, that where there are actual dragons in the world, there's actual things that are going on in the world that we don't want our kids to have to deal with or face. That thank God there are people like them, that we see them as people that are leaders, that we see them as people who are change makers. They're people just because of who they are. Like I love that my oldest she's just friends with everybody in her school. Like everybody is a friend of Ev's. She gets invited to all the parties, which is, and at this point I'm like, that's so cool that everybody, she's just friends with everybody. She's just kind to everybody. And that's what people are picking up on. And it's like, I want to nurture that she's a person that just people think are kind. And I remember, even in my own life, I have a girl who lives locally. She lives just a few minutes from me right now. A girl that I went to high school with, and she, blessed me in the biggest way. One day we were at Whole Foods, and I saw her with her daughter, and I was there with my daughters, and she introduced me to her daughter, her 9-year-old daughter, as she's like, I always remember Alain as like, he was always so kind to everybody in school. She's like, I always just loved that about you, and I really appreciated that. He was just always so kind. And, I didn't even get emotional just thinking about it now, just like how much of a blessing that was that she said that. And to think like, yeah, like that's the person I chose to be. And that's the person that I grew up wanting to be. And that's the thing that I want to continue. I want to just pass that on. It was not the dragon I want to slay with my kids. I want to pass that on to them, and to see that that's kind of happening a little bit. And that I hope that's the intention, is that that we're just kind, that we just love other people, and we just see the best in them and treat them as if they're that. I just love that.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, like I if I think of some of these, like the political event we're talking about, like I go to a place of like, well, to go with what you're saying there too, right? Like as I wonder, right, how much kindness was in these people's lives, right? Like What what was their life like their childhood like what got them to the place where this was the solution, right? And yeah, I wonder, a little more kindness, a little more ability to be able to process their own dragons, a little more help in that respect. Because we, unfortunately, I don't know how much was available, as a kid. Um, and I think maybe there are some times, or even right now, where people don't realize that there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of people that could support if you've got these kind of dragons going on. Um, yeah, but just a little more kindness certainly helps in a lot of areas. And I guess also when I thought about these dragons too, what I realized with my kids is I want them to know about them, when it's like age appropriate. Like I know that, you don't want to tell them too early and scare the crap out of them. But I think there's a point, I don't know what the ages are, and for every parent, every kid is different, but I think it's important for them to know that there are these external dragons out there so that they don't grow up in this like bubble and think the world's like this amazing, safe. I mean, it is an amazing place and it is largely safe. And I also do think it's important for them to become aware of some of these things, right? So that they can have an ability of processing their own fears. Like, oh, that seems really scary out there. How do I deal with that internally? I think that's an important thing to learn very early. Otherwise, because I know I was in quite a bubble growing up myself. And it wasn't until like my early 20s that I left North America and got an opportunity to live overseas. And then that was like mind blowing to me, really, in terms of like,
Mm.
oh, there's a lot more. I mean, I knew of obviously a little bit, but not. I had never actually like really lived it. And anyways, I think what I'm trying to say is I think it's really important for kids to, yes, have their ability to slay their own dragons and be exposed to more external ones, I guess, as they grow, so that they can learn how to process those as they evolve, not to keep them in a little bubble, hope that they never learn about these things, and then think that's going to turn out.
Yeah, yeah, like you were talking about from the movie Inside Out. Like, there's no real joy without sadness, and when you have both of those, it creates something much more magical than if you were just sheltered from the one.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to try and protect them. And same with us, right? It's not about trying to create a life that's, trying to keep it only joyful or trying to keep it only happy. Like I think that's quite unrealistic. I think that whole positive psychology thing it misses a huge part of this where there are going to be some things that are upsetting. Like even the most spiritual gurus I've met, they don't say it's not about never being triggered. It's about no, no, you're still going to get triggered. It's about how big an impact do you let that have on your life? How long do you stay triggered for? Like some people will end up having something that happens and they'll stay triggered for the rest of their life. They'll let it run their entire nervous system and their entire life for the rest of their life, right? They'll never be able or willing or whatever to look at that event. And then other ones will come on, and all of a sudden now you've got all these triggers that you haven't been able to process, these dragons that you haven't been able to look at and being able to slay. And then you never go back to when it was like to not be triggered. And so, at least from these
Mm-hmm.
spiritual gurus that I've learned from, it's recognizing trigger and then finding a way to, and there's lots of tools to be able to do this, and other people can help you. It's a way of recognizing it. Oh, yeah, that threw me off. And just shortening the duration of how long you stay triggered for, and a lot of times the amplitude of it as well.
Yeah,
I don't know.
good man. All right, well, let's go slay some dragons then.
And the fun thing is, as dads, as husbands, as business owners, I guarantee you there'll be something that has the potential to, trigger or be a dragon or, something that's going to throw you off in the next like hour, right? Like in the next couple of, like our own lives, our own houses, our dojo, right? We get opportunities to look at our own stuff almost every single
Yeah,
day, which is fantastic.
yeah, absolutely. All right, man.
All right.
That's great for
See ya.
today. Yeah, I'll talk to you later, man.
Let's slay some of our dragons.
Enjoy. Love you, man.
All right. Yeah, you too, bro. Ciao.